second video for today's remote classes is going to knock off that other element from the list we made the other day about how you get what appears to just be tabular data with no spatial element to actually depict itself in GIS, and that's using address data. We do this every day without necessarily thinking about it. We may type in an address, like 900, Mifflin Street, Philadelphia, for example. And, Google shows us where that is, right? And there is really no 900 Mifflin address, so, Google puts it right here where that probably would be. But maybe if I type one like 922, where there might actually be a home, and there it is, right? It puts me right on the home where 922 Mifflin Street is. So, we do this, and it happens all the time, and we get directions, and we probably never really question on what's going on here. How is this actually working? Behind the scenes, Google has built an incredibly detailed series of databases that could effectively be called an address locator. So those are rules that look at a series of data sets, whether it's parcels, points of interest, streets, states, cities, countries, whatever. And through a series of sort of algorithms does a matching, so that when you type in an address, it finds the best possible address match and puts you where you need to go. In this video, we're going to both see what ArcGIS offers you, in that category by itself, but then also on top of that, get a sense of what you can do yourself, and build yourself to achieve sort of the same thing, because one, the ArcGIS locator is going to cost money and credits, and I'm not sure how many of them you can use from your Philadelphia Online account. And then second, if you ever do find yourself in an instance where you're not connected to kind of the internet and you can only use Pro offline or desktop offline, it's still helpful to build your own address locator, that can serve you anytime you're trying to map addresses. So, to show you an example of what I mean, I'm going to make a new map here. Theoretically. And once I get stuff refreshed, we'll go and find data for video 2. And maybe at the beginning what I'll do is I'll drag a couple things in. I'll bring in Philadelphia artists and musicians original. And if I open the Philadelphia artists, we'll start with that one. I've got a field that's got maybe an address, and then something that's got a neighborhood, and then something that's got a city and a state and a zip code. That's all you need, right? Once you have even just a state or even a zip code or even a city, you essentially have what you need to plot your information. And so you can do it by using ArcGIS's built-in address locator. Anytime you want to plot addresses, you just right-click and go to geocode. It's right there below the XY coordinate. Now, this is not going to happen when you're in desktop, and I'll show you. It's a little bit rougher. But it's one of the nice things about Pro is it really kind of walks you through all of the steps it's going to take before it takes these things that exist in a table and brings them to you as points. So first thing it's going to want to know, what is the input table? And the first most important question is always this. Hey, is your address data in one field or is your address data in multiple? Well, in this instance, it's in multiple, right? I have an address here, a city here, a state here, and a zip code there. So I'm going to be wanting to load multiple fields into this. If instead it just had my address and then comma and something else and comma, well then we would say it was only in one field. So multiple fields, go to the next. Next thing, it's going to want to know the locator. Now I've got a couple that you'll have access to, state and country locator that I built and shared with you. In a moment we're going to build our own called city locator. But what you should definitely have here is the street center line, the ESRI, or the address locator. So let's go to World Geocoder as a way to start. It's going to cost money. This little thing comes up right here and says, this operation may consume credits. I have a small budget I can use for Philly U, so I'll do this as an example. But again, you'd want to be cautious when you're running tools like this, because if you do this for a ton of addresses and there's no controls on it, which I think there probably are, you might end up spending kind of some of Jefferson University's budget. So next thing, okay, we know our locator, and now it just wants to know, okay, where am I getting that information? Like when you're mapping me, here's all the stuff I, as ESRI's locator, want. I want all this information if you can give it to me. Tell me what you can give. Okay, well, we have address data stored in a field called address. We have neighborhood data stored in a field called neighborhood. We have city data stored in a field called city. We have state data stored in a field called state. And we have zip code data in a field called zip. If those did not locate automatically, you would obviously do the drop-down menu and find the right fields, but they seem to have. Next, where am I going to save this? You can just leave that as is for now. Go to next. This last thing, it's usually somewhat helpful when using the world locator. We only have addresses in the U.S., so we could just say like, hey, only look in the U.S. It just speeds it up slightly. You wouldn't do this, obviously, if you had addresses everywhere. We'd hit next. Keep it as all types right here. Hit finish and run. And it'll do its thing, and hopefully if I didn't make any errors, eventually, again, depending on the internet connection and everything, it will spit out what I need it to, which is where these points are located. So hopefully it doesn't take too much longer, but again, it's looking at the online resources, I think, is the reason why it's taking a little bit longer. But good stuff what I'm seeing here. I think we're going to be okay. There we go. 10 were matched, 0 were unmatched, 0 were tied. Don't need to rematch. ArcGIS has frustratingly chose the weirdest symbology imaginable here that is gray, so I think that's why we're not seeing anything. So let's try to make it like a nice red. And there we are. Like it matched essentially based on where they should be given an address. And I can open the attribute table and I can see there they are, right? Matched address. Some matched to an address, some matched to just a neighborhood. That's why we loaded it. And it's a good tool, right? And it was cheap. I don't think this probably costs more than 50 cents, if not less, to do all these addresses. So it's a good resource to have, but we're going to want to make sure when you're thinking of using it that we see how many credits they use in the future, because this could end up being expensive if you do this for like thousands of addresses, for example. So that's how you do it using ESRI's locator. But what I want to do now is see how we could build our own locator. And so to do that, I'm going to make a new map. And I'm going to drag in a couple of pieces of information to the new map once it gets settled. And I don't know why that map is down here. There we go. The map is now up here where I want it to be. So I'm on map 3. And for map 3, what I want you to draw in, or what's being called map 3 for me, it doesn't have to be for you. I'm going to bring in a couple pieces of data. I'm going to bring in U.S. places. Right? Those are census-designated places in the United States of America. I'm going to bring in the states. Turn my places off because it's taking a while to digitize. drag in states, and I'll drag in the countries of the world, all of which I'm going to use eventually for this analysis. Okay, so I have this information, places which are cities and towns and such in the United States of America. And states are actually just that, states, and countries are countries. And under tables now, what I'm going to bring in is I'm going to bring in musicians original. And what musicians original is, this is something I put together, for our class, is a series of some of the, the top musicians in the world, which roughly, some sense of information about what they were able to, sell in the genre that they were in, and, their release year and how active they were and such. And let me just see, might be a better version of this table that I'm going to load for you. There's one here called Musicians DBF. I think that's a little cleaner. There we go. Primary genre, secondary genre, claim sales. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that you're going to have that file to access, Musicians DBF, because that's the one I want you to play with. It's just got the fields a little better structured. Okay, so what do we have here? Well, we've got the almost 100 or so artists, and we have information about where they're from, where they were born, their country, their city, and their state if they were here. And so this is something that we might want to plot. We might want to, if we had access to geographic data, geocode this, and so they would map themselves to the appropriate kind of city or state or sort of country. So let's start with the city ones, that'll only get us to start the United States of America representatives, and then we'll build from there. So if you want to build your own locator, again, we are going to be building something here that allows us to do exactly what we did in the last step, to enter a series of addresses and have them map where they need to be. We need to build one that's referencing data. So if I want to map to cities, what I'm going to reference here is the U.S. places. And here's how you build any address locator. Come up to Analysis, identify your tools, search for Address Locator, create Address Locator. Cool? Pretty easy to do, right? The first thing it's going to want to know from you, and I'll show you an example of this in desktop to end because it's very, very similar. The first thing it's obviously going to want to know from you is the type. In this instance, it's going to be U.S. addresses, city and state, right? That's all I'm looking for, the city and the state. I know that I'm going to fail to match the AC/DC and Olivia Newton-John because they're from Australia. This one's only going to map the city and state because it's a good way to start. There's other options for this too, depending on the data you have. If you have parcel data, you might do single house. If you have, street data, street center line, you might do street name. You do it based on whatever data you have at your disposal, as some of the other videos on this channel will show. For now, we're really interested in sort of this high-level city-state stuff. So city and state. Critical is reference data. This is asking me, okay, what piece of geographic information should I be looking at to know where to match myself to? And that's U.S. places, right? That's what's going to give the information if I open its attribute table. And we can see U.S. places will tell you the name of the city and the state where that city is from, right? State and then name. And that way, if I say U.S. places, then I'll map the data, right? It's going to want to know, okay, I'm going to need some things so that when people give me addresses, I know where to look. Named place and city should be the same. So that's whatever field is storing your city's name. In this instance, it's Namelson. State, that was stored in name, and state abbreviation I find is the other good one to put here, right? State USPS. So there we go. My name is in named place, or my names are in Namelsad. My state abbreviation is state ups. The state that I'm in is here. And you can give this locator a name. Right, so maybe I'll come and I'll call it, once it eventually loads, I'll call it, new city locator. And I'll run it. And then it'll give its time to run. Right as it's caching its records down there. So it's running through that process right now. Good, and the locator has been complete right there. Give me 1 second, students. I'm just plugging in a power cord right now, just because I can see that the power is starting to eat up here. Cool. All right, so we've got our address locator created. I can get rid of it. It sort of isn't really a thing. It kind of exists behind the scenes. And I can know that because then if I come up and I right-click my musicians table and I go to geocode, a nice guided thing will start again. Yep, more than one field I know is where my information's in. And now I should have an option to pick that new city locator. Again, yours might look different than mine here because I have address locators created that you don't. But if I pick new city locator, right, only going to want a couple things for me. It's going to want to know where the city name's stored, and I know they're stored here. And it's going to want to know where's the state, and the state is stored here. Right, that's where that information is stored for the musician's data. And then so if I go to next, right, that's fine, finish, hit run, it'll do its thing here. $54 matched, 45 unmatched, and there they are, right? All the ones in the United States of America that were able to find a match are now showing where they are, right? And I can go back to my map and try to explore each one of them and click on them to learn a little more and see, there's Tulsa, and who came out of Tulsa was Garth Brooks. And this is all of Garth Brooks' information. Now, if I open the attribute table, though, to check on it, right, I will see some stuff that is missing, right? Kind of U in this status. U meaning unmatched, M meaning matched. And so if I, sort of organize to try to look at what's unmatched, there's a couple of reasons. For the most part, the artists that are not in this country obviously aren't matched because there's no information in the city and the state database. But there's a couple of others that are unmatched. Like row 57 here, for example, we'll scooch over, to the great flow rider right there, who was born in Carroll City, Florida. Didn't match, and the only reason that didn't match is it would mean that in my U.S. place database there was no Carroll City, right? Or it was missing, or it was too grossly misspelled. I think there's another example of this somewhere like the Bronx. This place data may only have it at New York City, and not necessarily by the borough, so it simply can't find itself. So, that's good, but it'd be better if we could almost do what Google does. I want to kind of recreate what Google has. And notice when I showed you that example earlier, that one address I searched went right to a parcel. The next address I searched kind of plotted where it would be along the road. Sometimes I may search an address that's so wrong, the best it can do is match me at a zip code level. I want to kind of execute that. What if I could build a locator that would first try to map someone at a city? And if that city was either non-existent or, it couldn't really find it, then maybe it would map them at a state. And then if it couldn't find a state or it couldn't find a city, then it would just map them to a country. You do this by building what's called a composite locator. A composite locator is just what allows you to put in each of your smaller individual address locators so that when you're running a system, it's going to try everything one at a time, to be able to find what it needs to. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to build our own composite. You'll notice that I've shared two with you. I've already built a county and a state one, so you don't have to. So all we'd have to do is come to our tools, search address locator again, and there should be one that says create composite. And if I create composite, what this wants to know is the locator. So locate them by the one you want to go first. So I want city to be first. And then after city, I want it to be state. And then after state, I want it to be country. It's looking for all the fields that those needed, right? That's the city, that's the state. Single key just means the name is wrong, but it should mean country. So just know that that means country. City, state, country. That's the information that it's going to want. So I'll run it. It's merging my three together, completes itself. And now, unless I screwed something up, I can go to my musicians DBF. I can geocode it. And I'll say here, forgot to name it, but there's my composite locator. City names would be in the city US. State names would be in the state US. The key, which was just a misnamed word for country. And I can run it. Good, and everybody matched. And now they matched at the world level. I can see them kind of in Australia, and I can see them here, and I can see those states that didn't. And if I open this up, right, that's the great thing is I can see here which one it did, right? If all they could match for was the city, which is the best, then it used the new city locator and matched it at the city. If it couldn't find the city, right, or if the city was too horrifically misspelled to be able to create a match. Like in this instance, it's Brooklyn, but that's more of that example that it just couldn't find, Brooklyn. What I would do if I had more time is I would build an even other layer, that looks at like an alias table so that Brooklyn knows it's supposed to be in Manhattan. But I was just being kind of rushing through this. But so it looked to be a state. And then if it couldn't match a state because it's not here, it would match it to the country locator and put it where it's supposed to be. Nothing is really any different in desktop, except that you would build your address locator by right-clicking. And you would say a new address locator. Things may look slightly different, but the process would be the same. Hey, what style am I supposed to be? Let's do a city-state one. What data am I referencing? I don't have anything loaded right now, but if I were to navigate to the data we were just using, and picked those US places again. And it's the same thing. Hey, what field is the named place? That's in Namelsad. What field is the city? That was in Namelsad. What field was the state? That was in name. What field was the abbreviation? Was in S2USPS. It is no different how you create them here. It would be the identical process. Similar, it would be an identical process Video 2, tables. If I were to drag in the musicians to geocode, you right-click and geocode. It seems to be slow, but hopefully it'll load in a second. It's just going to ask me, what I want to do. I just would add a locator. Right, I can find that one that we created together, right, or another one. There's one city locator that I created before, state locator. You'd add it, and you would use that locator. No different, right? It still wants the city name. It still wants the state name. It's just the muscle memory that looks different, but the skills are completely the same. So your proof that you were able to do this one, what I want you to do is follow the steps in either Pro or Desktop. Build the locator for the U.S. cities, merge it to build a composite locator for the cities, the states, and the county, and then map the musician's DBF for me. And so that I can really know that you've mapped it, I want you to symbolize it by either this field here, which is the genre, and color it up so the genres are a different color, or by the amount that they sold. You can do it by size. So either one of those, export the map for me from either Pro or Desktop, and that's how you'll show that you've done the address locators.